Okay, I just would like to set the scene a little bit regarding my background so that the audience have got a little bit of a perspective of who I am. 30-year executive working across growth phase companies, both listed companies and also private. CC executive and an NXD over the last 11 years across regulation, cybersecurity, generally technology, and also an author of 5 books. This is my latest book, Purposeful Discussions, and my next book, number 6, I hope to have available for early 2022. That's actually based all around trust-based leadership, which I will definitely touch on today. I would like to give an exclaimer. I do sit on the reside and sit on the boards and as chair of Renko committee on 2 companies. The expressions and the words that I will be sharing with today are none of the companies that I represent personally, but of mine as a thought leader coming here today. So first and foremost, Brian, I've got to say, I enjoyed reading your report, and there were a couple of things there which really popped out for me. I think the first thing was leadership for me, and the stats there, and I'm going to touch on that. And the second one, which to my horror, was the cybersecurity priorities, 18% by the people surveyed and interviewed, which alarmed me somewhat. Look, I think if we start taking it from the minds of the board, the first things first, you know, the board has got a lot of issues that it needs to deal with. Look, we talk about COVID and we talk about the severity of COVID, no question. I mean, I think the last stat that I saw was that we've got a $15 trillion problem globally. That is a problem, but we're not new to events that have taken us around the world. You know, the Spanish flu, whilst in its midst many years ago, was what I call severe. You know, we had 500 million people with the pandemic, of which 50 million people died. It was no surprise that Barack Obama was trying to put, by executive order, through a $1 billion a year research and development into what he saw as the next Spanish flu about to hit the global world. You could ask why us, the United Kingdom, didn't do exactly the same. Unfortunately, his work was scrapped under new presidency, but I don't really want to get into that. But the facts were that planning is an incredibly important part of the minds of the board. You know, we have to deal with political, we have to deal with legal, we have to deal with economic change, and we also have to deal with a huge acceleration in technological transformation and change. The tone at the top is incredibly important. If I look at a couple of instances there, so one of the instances was an article in Duke's University in America that interviewed 5 major CEOs that had a strong culture at the top. Now, you know, as a board, you know, you're dealing with redundancies, you're dealing with furloughs. You know, I wouldn't say that we survived 2020. I would say we probably just got by. We're not actually in the knowledge of exactly of all the situations in society and in business that have been affected as a direct result of the event. Okay, but as a board, you have no choice, but leadership has to step up and has to take responsibility, has to take accountability. Earlier today, we heard a lot about, you know, competencies and talent pools and skills of people. Well, that's all well and good, but the big question you need to ask yourself is how aligned, you know, is the strategy, okay, in which leadership has consented upon to execute across the business. Lots of people ferreting around, being busy is not necessarily producing defined outcomes. Now, there's a very good reason why the Japanese have a 50-year 100-year and 150-year business plan, because they stay focused on strategy within a framework and they execute against that, irrespective of market changes, market events that take place within that. They stay focused. And you could ask yourself why we are not staying focused in the same. Looking at cybersecurity, and in particular, looking at the vulnerabilities there. I mean, a good example of cybersecurity, if you know, and looking at the board. You know, if we're on the board, we are reliant on the information. So if a CIO comes and says to the board, absolutely, we have tested all of the frameworks and everything is absolutely perfect, the board accepts that organizational resiliency and our risks around, vulnerability is safe. Now, if we have a week later, we have a situation where the CIO or the CISSO comes back and says, I'm sorry, but we've just had a massive data breach. I'm sorry, but we have just had a ransomware attack. Doesn't build the board with confidence. Now, I did actually read a very interesting excerpt from an EY report, which says the cyber and privacy threat is increasing and expanding. About 6 in 10 organizations, that's 59% surveyed, have faced a material or significant incident. It goes on to talk about attacks and hacktivists. It talks about tech enablement. It talks about why there's a need for more cybersecurity, but it also goes on, to say that over 50% of boards do not trust the information provided. Earlier in this webinar, we heard about third-party security, and we talked a little bit about trust. But actually, why are boards and why are CIOs considering a zero trust network access strategy? That also has to be determined. The need to have a top-level cybersecurity NXD on every single business and board, as far as I'm concerned, is a business imperative if what we're looking at going forward will change, and it is going to change. The speed of information that we're receiving is changing. So why are we not, TransferWise was a perfect example, earlier, where they both had a ransomware attack followed by a significant data breach, and the list goes on. I mean, I could talk forever on this subject, but I'm not going to do that. We at IBEM commissioned a trust report last year, and we thought before the trust report actually went out, we were pretty convinced that we would get around 40–50% on the trust issue. No, we got 69% of people in their organization, either to their line manager, or actually to their CEO. They did not trust leadership, right? This is a massive issue. Look at businesses that have a mistrust strategy versus a trusted strategy with culture. The World Economic Forum wasn't wrong 3 years ago in its report, saying if you wanted to keep your job in between 2020 and 2030, you must employ some of the softer skills that we're talking about. And trust is actually the glue. It's the foundation. It's the very foundation between building your business, accelerating your business, and accelerating your business in change and transformation. The question is, what are we doing about that? Question is, like a lot of these things, why is strategy not the living, breathing soul of the organization? Because everybody needs to embrace strategy, embrace change. And I don't see this stopping. I think, if anything, COVID has accelerated what we're doing, possibly by something in the region of about 7 years in the last 9 months, which says to me that although we've got the 4th industrial revolution, there's a very good chance that the 5th industrial revolution is just around the corner, like we saw in the 2nd and the 3rd industrial revolution. McKinsey are not alone, PwC are not alone when they start talking on and around leadership, global leadership reports. Their last global leadership report stated out of 14,500 businesses that were interviewed globally and internationally at different sizes, that approximately 84% leadership did not have the ability to make a significant change, to deal with a major event, and actually to drive further performance. That means only 16% had the ability to do that. When we had the lockdown, the very first lockdown, on a board that I represent, we had our business response plan, not business continuity plan. We had our business response plan in play. When EY again did a survey, it showed that at the beginning of April, there was only around 6% of global businesses that had taken the time to look at the planning and to look at what needed to be safeguarded for the well-being of their staff, the well-being, welfare of their mental states, and all of the issues associated with working from home. So again, I go back to, where is strategy? Strategies not about execution. Strategy is about strategy within the business, which you can align objectives to, which you can align them resources to, and then you can actually start to drive better performance. It's no big surprise that if you're working on the board and you're not given detailed information, and not necessarily given the problem, it's about providing the solution. If you're a CIO or if you're a CISO, where is the independent reviews? Where's the independent, reports that we can read, that we can actually make informed decisions on, rather than just people making decisions because they've got a budget and because they've got allocated budget, or no big surprise that budgets get reduced if you can't defend the budget and you can't actually start to drive it. So I think from a board point of view, I think there is a point that with trust, there has to be listening. We have to listen as a board. We have to be more empathetic, yes. We have to start understanding the business needs and the dynamics of what those business needs mean and what they translate to order to get that kind of level of purpose in the business, but more importantly, to embellish trust and to use trust in terms of both competence and integrity, that we can make those decisions which make a real impact to the business. That to me is absolutely critical. But the issue I come back to, long range planning, where were we? Where are we? Why are we sitting down waiting for events to take place and unfold? Why are we not addressing the biggest significant areas within the business of the planning? Because digital transformation is constant. It's not a one project by project basis. We've got to be more proactive. Leadership had to step up. I personally had to step up on the boards that I represent and the businesses that we represent, on an ongoing basis through this area, in order to support them and help them journey through some incredibly troubled waters, challenges and adversity that they hadn't really thought about. Now, recently, I wrote 2 blogs. The first blog I wrote was about the learnings that you get from people like naval SEAL teams and army generals, and the transfer of knowledge that you're getting. I think we're coming into an era where it's wisdom intelligence. We've also heard of IQ. Everyone knows EI. Everyone knows, well, you should know SI, spiritual intelligence. People have been talking about, and Duke's University major professor in the sciences has talked recently about decency intelligence. I'm writing a blog which comes out on the 25th of February this year, which is going to talk about wisdom intelligence and why we need to start listening, not just trying to execute against strategy or against things or objectives that mean very little to the business in terms of business priority. Brian, your report is all about priorities for 2021. I'm going through that report and I'm thinking, these survey statistics, there's got to be more, because the seriousness of some of these things is particularly when we start talking about being attacked, right, and the vulnerabilities and risk committees now are being formed, even in small businesses now. You've got audit committees which now have got risk committees attached to it, but risks, if I see a risk register and I don't find priorities like cybersecurity, I understand there's a big issue. there's a big issue, then I'm going to want to question who formulated that risk register, and I want to know the depth and the meaning to that to the business, both short term, medium term, and long term. Because these have massive ratifications in terms of the ability to accelerate, the ability to scale, and the ability to grow. It's no different that somebody said earlier, talked about how AI, I think it was John Higgins, talked about AI and how AI is going to be doing everything in the world, probably even making your coffee in the morning. But there was one blog that I wrote 3 years ago on ethics around robots and AI, and how can we trust that? When I met the ICO many years ago in Parliament, talking about GDPR and also PECA 2, which is the 2006 directive out of Europe, which has got, as far as I'm concerned, more severity than GDPR. I was saying, how do you actually deal with FCA prosecution, let's say, on an algorithm or a robot? Who are you going to blame? You're going to blame the person that actually wrote the code, or actually going to blame the algorithm? These are big issues. We start talking about governance as well, and we've seen organizations on the softer side, Brian, which the report also lends itself to, which I was very pleased to see. On around PwC have just hired their first CPO officer, Chief Purpose Officer, okay, to talk, because it's not a HR issue, and this is not a soft marketing issue. This is a very severe issue. This is Children's Mental Health week at the moment, and you'll see from the 1st to the 7th of February, you'll be seeing a lot of things going. But we've got to talk about adults' mental health. We've got to talk about well-being. We've got to talk about health and safety. Geoff earlier talked about the hybrid model. And I think my view is that the hybrid model that he talks about, I think, is going to be a different attribution in terms of time. But I think you still got to deal with all of these issues, and I'm not necessarily convinced when I go back to things like company planning, business strategy in all instances. I'm not blaming everyone, but I'm saying from the information that I'm being received from the majors, Deloitte, EY, we're seeing an imbalance in the ability to be able to plan forward. We're seeing an imbalance in the ability for people to actually undertake and execute at a very senior level strategy, and be able to execute that, from the board to the ELTs down to the people that actually execute the work in senior management and in general roles. So I think that it's very important that from the board's point of view, that we're able to be fed the right information at the right time to be able to make better informed decisions. Otherwise, all we're going to do is be wasting an awful lot of investment, an awful lot of time, and an awful lot of talent pools that we need. We need to upscale their training and their ability to be able to embrace and embark and upskill so that we can use them going forward. I think 2020 to 2030 is going to be incredibly difficult if we don't have the education, if we don't have the ability, the leadership to be able to steer people with better skills into environments and into expansion and into growth. Then I think we've got a bigger issue on our hands. So I hope that's okay. I've got so much more, but honestly, Brian, I know I'm running out. I'd rather run out of time or I'm running out of time.
We're bang on time now, Geoff. So can I say, first of all, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you one of the questions that's come in.
Sure.
We haven't got too long, but someone just asked, what is Geoff's thoughts on business strategy that is developed independent security and then security adjusts to it? Is this a good idea or a bad idea?
I think first and foremost, business security, security that's, if you produce a security strategy framework externally, which is based on a set of briefings and requirement from in-house people that have got the knowledge, I don't think that's a bad thing. If they are creating a strategy for a company without that in-depth knowledge and without things like penetration testing and things like that, I think you'd be digging yourself a grave hole in the circumstances. I think that we've got to have inclusion. So as I said before, the need to have a cybersecurity NXD with a depth of knowledge and experience who's intrinsically involved in the day-to-day of the technical strategy and the vulnerabilities, and placing things like cybersecurity at the very heart of technology is the answer. But where they're not when it's not at the heart of security, heart of technology, then I think there's going to be more problems along the way.